On page 3, EX 15.7, Councillor Campbell held the item down. That's on the Mayor's Advisory Panel for the future mega international event. And we're also dealing with ED 12.4, which is on page 5. So we're dealing with those two together. Councillor Shiner.
Madam Speaker, you had passed over item EX 15.10. As my colleague thought I had some in-camera questions, I'm all satisfied and just wanted to release it.
Okay.
Could we deal with that?
Sure. So on page 4, Councillor Shiner's releasing EX 15.10. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Campbell, do you have any questions on your EX 15.7?
ED?
Pardon?
What was the corresponding ED? 12.4,
ED,
right?
ED 12.4. You held
Just
that one too.
a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
The report refers to special events such as World Pride 2014, the 100th Grey Cup, Indian Film Academy Awards, those are category A, the IIHF World Junior Hockey Championship, and so on. This fall, Toronto is hosting the World Cup of Hockey, and I'm wondering if we are doing anything as a city to recognize and celebrate that event.
What item are we on?
This is City Bill, ED 12.4.
Through the Speaker, yes, we are working with the NHL on that event.
Can you tell me a little bit about what we're doing?
It's just event support and staff services. There's no funding to support.
So it is a private company, so we have our event support staff who are working directly with them to provide any support that we can, but there's no funding available through there.
Okay. So in regard to the recommendation to develop a long-term funding strategy, I guess I'm a little perplexed as to why this is before us. Because doesn't our participation in any major event, isn't it really wholly dependent upon funding? And haven't we just heard, the more or less dire straits that the city is in from a financial standpoint? So how could we possibly develop a long-term funding strategy?
So through you, Madam Speaker, the reason we recommended, so prior to the Pan Am event last year, we would receive on average 1 to 2 requests for supports for events. This year, as you'll see from the list that's attached, we've had numerous requests for some, both in-kind and financial support for some of these events. So we are Staff Economic Development Committee has asked us to take that list and compare it to the evaluation criteria and principles that have been recommended by the advisory panel, and we're going to do that and bring it forward to committee next month. But if we continue to receive some of these requests, and some of them are major Invictus games, etc., they're beyond our capacity to just absorb them. The kind of requests we've had before are for much smaller scale of event.
So I guess I'm wondering what the completed task will look like. We have in Appendix A, we have the City of Toronto bidding and hosting strategy for significant special events, and then it's got the criteria by which we assess these events, these proposals. I'm just wondering what approval of this, what will be the outcome of approval of this? Will we be setting aside a special budgetary reserve? Will we be asking for more money from a different revenue stream? I don't know how this is, I don't know what do we expect this will look like, this long-term financial strategy.
Well, through you, Madam Speaker, a few years ago, Council established the Major Special Events Reserve Fund, and originally money was put in there to support the Pan Am Games, and last year they were put in money specifically to help support the Canada 150 projects. But my understanding is the intent when that reserve fund was established was to work with finance to develop a strategy to figure out what would be an appropriate funding level to maintain in there, so as requests come forward we could evaluate it, and yes, for each request we would come to Council for approval, but without we just want a strategy on how we can keep that reserve fund replenished and to what level it should be replenished, and we would work with the CFO on such a strategy.
So then, okay, this is the last question. So in regard to Pan Am, how did we fund that then? If we didn't have a long-term financial strategy, how did we fund that?
Through you, Madam Speaker, my understanding is there was a lump sum amount put into that reserve when it was established specifically for Pan Am, and my understanding was went into capital, but the reserve fund was, I think, from surplus. Some monies from the surplus one year were put in.
So, supplementary question. So if there is no surplus, if going forward, and given the horizon that we're looking at, it doesn't look like there's going to be a surplus for a number of years to come, how can we possibly develop a long-term funding strategy for major events?
So that's the staff's recommendation, was to go through the budget process so that it could be considered with all the other priorities.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. That's it.
I have one in New York. Thank you. Councillor Pasternak, questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you to staff, in 2000, correct me if I'm wrong, 2015, the World Women's FIFA tournament was held in Canada, in Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Montreal, Halifax, and Moncton. And there were a total of 0 games in Toronto. That seems like low-hanging fruit. Can you explain why Toronto was left out of an international, high-profile event like that?
Through you, Madam Chair, we were in the midst of Pan Am, so it was one of the reasons why we couldn't proceed with that, and there was a blackout in terms of participating. We did participate in the under-20 tournament for that.
Well, Ian Trope is quoted in various media reports. The guy who was fired, I guess he was fired after he said this. He said, "We came to an agreement which allows both events to be successful. We were told the desire was to have a national event, and they," I don't know who they is, I guess they is the Canadian Soccer Association, "did not need Toronto to win the bid." Now, did we just bend over and fly the white flag, or did we fight for games here?
So that was the Canadian Soccer Association's decision, and it wasn't our decision.
So do we report to the Canadian Soccer Association?
No, but they are the bidder to FIFA.
And that's the explanation on why we hosted no games here.
That's all the information I have, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
Okay, thank you. I'm coming off.
You're coming up? Okay. Okay, so Councillor Campbell, do you want to just release 15.7? Pardon? Yeah. Okay, on page 3, X 15.7, Councillor Campbell is just releasing. All in favor? Recorded vote. Yeah. But,
Councillor Perruzza, please. Councillor DeGiorgio. Councillor McMahon, please. Councillor Matlow. Councillor Bailão, your vote, please. Councillor Bailão, we've closed the vote. Can you indicate your vote? Okay. Yeah.
The item carries unanimously, 32 in favor.
on page 5, ED 12.4, on the item, recorded vote.
Counselor Perruzza, please. Counselor DeGiorgio. Counselor Matlow.
Item ED 12.4 carries 31 to 1.
On page 3, T 15.78,